The Authenticity Delusion, the real reason why you can never just be yourself. This piece first appeared on my Substack. Please go check it out over there. Subscribe to my Substack if you enjoy. But yeah, let's get into it. There is one word I have come to despise more and more over the past few years: authentic. The word appears in various contexts, whether in discussions of ethnic cuisine, vintage clothing, or cultural experiences. While I certainly have my feelings about that usage, it would seem to at least pertain to that which is original or that which is unaltered. When we speak of authenticity in the unqualified sense, as in, she is so authentic, or wow, he is really just being authentic, this is where I take the most issue. What exactly do we mean when we call someone authentic? Very true here, guys. I feel like, especially, like, you will often hear like, oh, this is authentic Mexican food, or this is an authentic pair of sneakers, right? Like, I don't take a ton of issue with that. I don't think it's perfect usage, but at the same time, like, I get what's trying to be conveyed by that. It's saying this isn't Chili's Tex-Mex tacos that you're getting. These are made by Mexicans. You know what I mean? Or at least someone who has been trained in Mexico in terms of their cuisine. Now, it could beg the question, like, if we go back far enough, what are the influences on that Mexican cuisine? Is there really such thing as an authentic food, or is it all influences as well? It's an interesting question to get into, but I'm not. That's not where I take issue. Again, I'm taking issue with the unqualified use of it. Like, wow, man, I'm just not feeling I've been really authentic lately, or man, that dude's such an inspiration. Like, he's just so authentic. That I have issue with. So, but let's get into it. What do we exactly do we mean when we call someone authentic? We don't, of course, mean someone is authentic in the same way that a vintage Carhartt Detroit jacket on eBay is. This is obviously authentic because it's like, this is the original. This was made this year when these first started coming out. Therefore, it's an authentic original, right? That's not what we mean. As in, they are being original. So what do we mean when we call someone else or ourselves authentic? The origin of the word authentic stems from the Greek word authentikos, my fault, which combines autos, self, and hentes, doer or author. I apologize if my Greek is poor there. So authenticity literally means to be the author of oneself. From this definition, we can now rightly understand what we mean when we say someone is being authentic, or its opposite, inauthentic. It means they are succeeding or failing at self-authorship, being capable or not being capable of writing their own story, which is to say, taking command, responsibility, or ownership of it. Yet this definition, more so than our preliminary understanding, which is just about food and clothing and stuff like that, I find wanting, for it is unclear at present whether any of us is actually the author of our own story. Readers may object, yet I'd pose this question to them. What is the first act an author performs when he begins a new story? Before the pen hits the page, your fingers hit the keys, what is it that the author must do? He must choose to write the story. This is really important, and you have to think about this. Like, if we're going off of the definition of authentic, if we're really digging into the etymology of it, when we say we're being authentic, we're being self-authoring, but we don't pick the circumstances of our lives. In fact, they are given to us, and we have no choice over them. I would personally be taller if I could be, right? But I don't have a choice about that. I've been thrown into my genetics as such, and so there are certain choices that have been made for us, and that we cannot be authentic in terms of the circumstances that we've been given. And I think those circumstances actually affect us a lot more than we think. But this is the first layer of my examination. We're going to go a lot deeper into what it means to be authentic, but I do think it's worth considering, the etymology of it and how it's a misleading word in general. Yet in the case of every human being who has ever walked the earth, from Napoleon to your uncle, none of us has ever chosen to begin our story. None of us chose to be conceived and delivered. Rather, we were thrown into a particular time, place, culture, body, class, and family with a contingent set of unique features, advantages, disadvantages, abilities, and disabilities, all of which make us the particular who that we are. I should have put who in parentheses there, the particular who that we are. From this perspective, it becomes clear that we appear much more like characters than authors, parts of a larger story rather than directors. If then we are characters rather than authors, meaning the definition of authenticity is inherently incoherent, does this still mean that the idea of a person being authentic, having self-authorship, is entirely impossible? So it may be definitionally a bit misleading, but does that really mean like we can't ever do something authentic? Not necessarily. While it does suggest that our circumstances of existence are more akin to a character than an author, it doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to choose anything. Even the most hard-headed of determinists would not refute the point that we at least have the experience of free will. Therefore, it would seem that to be authentic means to be making authentic choices. We may not choose the circumstances of our lives, but within the scope of that life, we have the ability to make authentic choices / self-authored decisions. So yeah, I mean, okay, cool. We can't pick our circumstances. I think everybody accepts and understands that, right? But perhaps, perhaps we can still make choices on a daily basis that reflect, the inner me, the inner I that I am. I can make a decision to go and record this video because, the innermost part of Nick Moran says, you know what? You're meant to be recording a YouTube video. You're not meant to be going to, you're not meant to be on the pre-med track. You're actually meant to be recording videos in your dorm room like a little goblin. But that's more or less what I'm getting at here. Yet here too we run into trouble. What does it mean to make an authentic choice? So yeah, we still got some issues here. Like, what is an authentic choice? If that is something we can do, yeah, we can't pick our circumstances. If we can pick our choices, what is an authentic choice like? So let's dig into it. Does it simply mean doing what one wishes or wants? Readers might say, well, yes, it does in fact. But that raises the question, why do people wish or want anything? To answer this question and thus get to the bottom of whether or not we can truly make authentic choices, since it has already become clear that we cannot be authentic in the definitionally sense of the word, as we are not authors but characters, we must determine where such choices might originate from. If our desires originate from within us, from some inner essential self, then perhaps choosing based on those desires could count as authentic. But what if our desires themselves are borrowed? What if wanting itself is imitative? Here we must turn shortly to the work of Stanford philosopher René Girard. So here I'm pointing to the fact that perhaps our desires are not our own, and therefore making the authentic choice based off of desire or want then becomes rather difficult to know, is that really what I want, or have I been influenced? But let's get into it. Girard is famous in philosophy for his concept of mimetic desire, which posits that we desire things because others desire them. Girard believed that we didn't want things out of some innate value possessed by the thing, but rather by what that thing said about us. Because, of course, things alone have no value, only what we as humans imbue them with. This is very true. I mean, money doesn't have value except for the fact that we all recognize it as having value. When I give you a $20 bill, there's nothing innate about this that says I should be able to buy, your Cuban sandwich from you for this bill, except for the fact that we all recognize that this is a thing. So this is a very obvious stuff, but let me keep going. So the traditional model for understanding desire was modeled by us, the subject, wanting X, this Cuban sandwich, which is the object, the subject wanting the object, because of the qualities inherent to the object. I want the Cuban sandwich because I love, the meat and the way the cheese melts into the meat, and then the crispness of the bread, and the pickles in there really just add an extra layer of taste to it that really just transform the experience of my day. And I'm just so taken by this sandwich, which in the case of a sandwich, maybe this isn't a good example, because I think in some ways that might be true. I don't necessarily want a Cuban sandwich because other people wanted a Cuban sandwich. And Girard actually does make a distinction. There is those things that we desire for the experience of them, like eating a Cuban sandwich, but there are also those things that we desire because of what they allow us to be. And that's really what I'm trying to get into here. Because when we talk about making authentic decisions, it's like picking the sandwich or the Cuban or the grilled cheese. Like, these aren't like super life-altering authentic decisions. When we talk about being authentic, we, in the colloquial sense, we are talking about existential decisions, what career path I'm going to choose, what I'm going to do in this pivotal moment. So that's why we're focusing on less the experiential side of mimetics, but more about the what we want to be in terms of mimetic desire. But okay, so we've gone over the traditional model for why we want things, and that's the qualities inherent in the object. I want the Lamborghini because it's got these qualities, XYZ. Yet Girard shows that this model is too simplistic and that a true model of desire would be more like a triangle wherein there's the subject, that's us, the object, that could be another person, and the model. Sorry, the object, which is the thing, and the model, which could be another person. The model is the person through whom our desire for the object is mediated. For example, you don't want to live in New York City for the objective qualities of New York City. You might think you do, but you really want to live there because of the other people who live there and whose existence you find desirable, whether they be artists, businessmen, or intellectuals. The model mediates your relationship with the object. I think this is very true. I think the New York City effect is a great example of it, actually. This mimetic desire, Girard believed, was present at all times and on all levels of human experience. Examples can range from the obvious and materialistic, such as wanting a certain type of car because we believe it will make us a certain type of person, to the more subtle and identity-based aspects, such as being attracted to a person not just because of who they are, but what we become out of dating and being seen with them, or choosing a career because it is what all our peers are doing despite our lack of interest in the thing. The even more subtle moral aesthetic stances, such as siding with a particular political cause because it is what everyone else in our group supports, or preferring indie music because it makes us feel better and more unique than everyone else in the mainstream. I think we all have had the experience of meeting someone who listens to, I don't know, like maybe like Alice in Chains, or like, I'm trying to think of good examples here. I don't know, insert an indie band, you know what I mean? I like Vampire Weekend, and I look down on people who listen to Taylor Swift, you know what I mean? It's actually a true example in my case. But, like it can be the most subtle things. It can be the most, and on the political view thing too. Like, I mean, there's so many people I know who their political views, they didn't come to, but rather they adopted based off of the people that they spent time with. This last example, this is meaning the music example, I think is worth touching on too, because while all the previous examples showed how we clearly derive our desire from others, this last example shows how even by carving our own path, we are doing so in opposition to other people. When we choose to dress differently from our peers or consume different media, we aren't being authentic. In some ways, we might actually be acting less authentically because we are still defining our entire sense of authenticity in opposition to our peers. And even if you say, no, not me, I genuinely like baggy jeans, cardigans, and tote bags, you are still modeling that behavior off of someone else. You know what I mean? Even the most fringe of movements still have a model that they're working from. However, returning to our question of whether we can make authentic choices, I think it's clear that Girard's mimetic theory has shown that we cannot. I really want you guys to think about this. Like, if there's a decision in your life that you've made, even the most subtle ones, it really is the most subtle things. Really try to examine: did I come up with that? Did the inner me come up with that idea? Or find that interest, or was I influenced in some capacity? And I think in all cases, you really will find that you were influenced. We're going to get into that later. We may experience desire as arising from something internal, as expressions of some true self. But in truth, the desires are borrowed all the way down. There is no authentic core generating desires. It is all imitation from the start. It has now become clear that we can neither be authentic in the definitive sense, as we are characters rather than authors, nor can we make authentic choices in the limited sense because of the nature of desire as mimetic. But even this account of mimetic desire assumes something: that there exists a self which could, in principle, discover its true desires if only it were aware enough to see through the mimetic fog. It assumes there's an interior consciousness that has been corrupted or colonized by external influences, but might, with enough introspection or awareness, find its way back to authenticity. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger suggests the problem runs even deeper than this. So yeah, I think this idea of mimetic desire is coming from this place like, actually, if I can just meditate hard enough, or if I can just focus my attention. Sorry, I'm checking the time right now because I've got to be somewhere at 6:30. If I can just focus my attention enough, I can actually discover internally what it is I truly desire, and that I can get past the mimetic veil. I can say, you know what? No, I can say this is all fake, and it's actually, I want this. I really want this. This is me. I want this. This isn't influence. Even if we could do that, it's presupposing that there is some sort of I that exists independently of the world. But we're going to get into that now. For Heidegger, the problem with thinking that there is some inner consciousness that is separate from the world, existing somewhere behind our eyes and in our brain that is not part of this world, but rather a subject that examines the object of the world, is that it ignores the brute fact that our consciousness or awareness is constantly being mediated through the world around us. This is such a crucial point, guys. And I think so many people, I literally think the majority of people live like this, that they think, because it's kind of how we experience reality to a sense. Like, we do feel like we've got this kind of inner voice that's separate from the world, but you have to keep in mind that inner voice has always been with you, or not, that doesn't even make sense that way I'm saying, but like, it's always been in the world. That inner voice, everything that it knows is mediated through the world around it. It doesn't exist separately from that. You know what I mean? This is such an enlightenment idea of Descartes. He said, "I think, therefore I am," and this really drastically changed the trajectory of Western philosophy, and everything from then on was very much, we are the subject and this is the object. Modern science, in a sense, is us as subject and the world around us as object that we can study. But actually, our consciousness is much different than that. It's always in the world. But let's keep going. There is no inner me and there is no inner you. Just as you are not the author of your story, having not chosen to be where you are now, you are not a spectator watching the world from some inner interior theater. You are already in the world, inseparable from it. You are not some inner core that has experiences of the world. Rather, you are constituted by those experiences. There is no you that is separate or prior to your engagement with the world. Let that sink in. Maybe this is obvious to some of you guys. This is news to me when I first started reading Heidegger, because it's like this blows open just Western metaphysics that we are some separate consciousness, because we hear things like be yourself, act authentic, all of these things. It's like, that is presupposing that there is a me in there that isn't affected by the world around me. That's just not the case. Since birth, we're in the world being influenced by things. It's a loop, the way we view the world then affects the world we see, but the world we see then affects the way that we can attend to the world, and it's just back and forth. And I might, I'm very passionate about this, as you can all see, but that's because I think it's such a key insight that we need to have, and goes completely against the kind of way that we think about our consciousness. But it's clearly the case. It's clearly true. I don't see a good refutation of it, and I think that's Heidegger's incredible innovation. But let's keep going. Therefore, even if we could somehow remove ourselves from under the veil of mimetic desire, we would not find some treasure trove of thoughts and desires that were totally our own. We would find nothing at all, a great void, a complete absence. There is no inner I waiting to be discovered, only a me that has always already been in the world. Yeah, let's imagine this for a second. Let's imagine all of the worldly influences that you have are pulled back from you. You're just freed from them. What are you then? Is there any you left? Like, seriously, you're the collection of your experiences. And therefore, I mean, what's there, man? What's there? I don't think anything's there. So, we like to think, if I meditate enough, I'm going to discover like this treasure trove of inner things that I've always known to be the case, and that I can follow and be my guiding light. It's like, no, that's not true. And I'm not saying this to be nihilistic. This is just the case. And I don't think this necessarily leads to nihilistic conclusions either. And we'll get more into that as we go. But I think this is really, really, really crucial stuff to understand. Okay, don't believe me? Try this. Pause and ask yourself a simple question. What kind of person do I want to be? Whenever an answer appears, identify the model. So we're going back to mimetic thinking. Identify the model that you're basing it on. Then try again. Find one desire. Please just find one desire that doesn't come with a model attached to it. Spoiler alert, you can't. I had a panic attack almost over the summer. I wouldn't say panic attack, but just kind of like a more philosophical, existential panic attack over the summer, because I was sitting with myself and I was asking myself some very basic questions. What type of man do I want to be? What do I want people to say about me at my funeral? And because I've been reading a lot of Girard at the time, I found that at base, I don't know if I want anything. And that perhaps everything that I think I want, everything I want people to say off at my funeral is based off of things that have been said at other great men's funerals. And what type of man I want to be is based off of the models that I look to. I look to Jesus, for example, in terms of a moral guiding figure. And so that's my model. And I would say that's a great model. We're going to have models. That's just how it's going to work. I think it's a much better model than, say, like an Andrew Tate. Right. But that's how we're going to answer those questions. We're not going to be able to answer those questions without a model. And so that's a really interesting thought process to do, because if you don't believe that you aren't, if you really believe like, oh no, there is an inner me that's separate from the world, then answer those questions, you know what I mean, without having a model. And if you do, I think you're lying. I just do, you know. I think it's obvious that you are, but let's keep going. Again, you can't do this. It's a great exercise because it proves the point. But notice something else in this exercise. You're looking for an authentic you, as if peeling away layers might reveal it. Yet the very act of looking, the searcher itself, is just more mediation, more being already in the world. There's no one in there doing the searching separate from what they find. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. I don't think I've already pretty much explained that, but let that sink in. All right. At this point, we have demonstrated that authenticity is the definitive sense. In the definitive sense, is not possible. That's the definition. It's not it doesn't make sense definitionally. That authenticity in the limited sense is similarly impossible. That's Girard's mimetic theory. We always have models. And that even if it were possible, there would be no place from which an authentic decision could be made or originate. Again, because we are already in the world. There is no inner eye. So where does this lead us? Perhaps paradoxically to a kind of freedom. If there is no authentic self to discover or betray, then we can stop the exhausting search for it. We can stop judging ourselves and others for selling out or being fake. This doesn't mean all choices are equal or that nothing matters. Bill Burr performing at Saudi Arabia's Riyadh Comedy Festival is still a sellout move. And the kid who goes into finance simply because it's what all his peers did still lacks a kind of self-understanding. Okay, quickly, I think with this, what I've said here, though, I think you could make a point that I've described the fact that authenticity is not really a real thing. Like the way we use the term doesn't really work, right? So I've described the way authenticity works. We're already in the world, and therefore there is no inner eye to be authentic from. And all of our desires anyway are mediated through models. Okay, that's all fair. But that's an is about what authenticity is, versus an ought would be Bill Burr shouldn't have performed at the Riyadh Comedy Festival, and this kid shouldn't be pursuing finance because all of his peers are doing it. Or, the pre-med kid who's got strict Indian parents, you know what I mean, who want him to be a doctor when he really wants to go to art school. What's actually wrong with that, they might say. I think the answer to this is actually more simple than you think. I mean, I'm personally someone who still believes that honesty is important, and if you don't, that's cool, but I think it is important. And I think simply these things just scream of hypocrisy and inauthenticity. In Bill Burr going to Saudi Arabia and performing, he is quite literally going against the fact that he called Saudi Arabian money blood money back in 2012. You know what I mean? He's going against that. In the same way, the kid going into finance is doing it because of all of his peers, instead of the fact, that he'd rather be pursuing journalism, right, or something else. That's him, being dishonest to who he is. And we only have so much time here on the planet, and I think it's worth being honest with ourselves. And that's really all that I would say to that objection. But anyway, let's continue. Some choices are made out of genuine engagement with the world, while others are made out of fear avoidance or pursuit of status, and that difference matters. And again, like I just said, it does matter. However, even for those of us who are truly doing things we feel drawn to, we must still acknowledge that we are not acting from some deeper inner knowledge. Acknowledge that we are not acting from some deeper inner knowledge. That will only lead us to render harsh judgments on those we deem to be acting inauthentic. This will only lead us to render harsh judgments on those who we deem to be acting inauthentically, while simultaneously imagining ourselves to be uninfluenced. Instead, we must own our borrowed desires, acknowledge our models, and choose consciously among the various ways of being in the world available to us. We can ask, not is this authentic, but is this the life I want to live? Knowing full well that I is constituted by that very choice. The word authentic promises a destination that doesn't exist, but the journey, the constant becoming, the engagement with the world, and with others, that's what's real. That's all there is. There you go. That's my article. Kind of a shorter one this week. We're really digging into authenticity. There's been something I've been thinking about a lot lately, because I think it's just a term that gets thrown around so much. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think social media too, I haven't brought that in, but I think that it makes it so much harder to be authentic when I think, like, I've called social media in past articles literally a mimetic vortex. When we're scrolling reels, we're getting so many more influences than people in the past would have had. They would have just had the people in their village to model off of, or the people in their city state, right? But now, today, we are literally getting hit with hundreds of mimetic impulses a second. Advertising is insane. Like, we are the most mimetically challenged people. And so I think because of that, our culture really wants to turn to authenticity. And it sounds like a good thing, right? But then you realize that that's kind of, you're just going to be chasing something that doesn't exist if you're going for authenticity in that sense, because like I've shown, and I really do feel like I've shown this, it's not real. We're already in the world. There's no inner eye that can make those decisions. And so, we're always going to be influenced. That's just the truth. And I think that's where the real job that we have comes in just trying to make honest decisions, acknowledging that we're going to be influenced, but out of the influences we have, picking the one that suits us best. And maybe that's not the most uplifting message of all time, but I also don't think it means to be a reason to be pessimistic either. I think it actually, it's like, yeah, it's a brute fact, but it's also like, cool, all right, here's my options. I'm only going to live so long, and I want to live honestly. And that's really all there is to it. And if you think about it that way, you can still be authentic in that sense. Though again, I would disagree with kind of the etymology and the way it's phrased. And I think the colloquial usage is really bad. And I think this is something we need to work on. I think it's a buzzword that we have to get rid of. But anyway, I've been Nick Moran. This piece, again, originally appeared on my Substack. Please go subscribe over there. It means the absolute world to me. Like, this is what I live to do. This is my authentic kind of pursuit. This writing in this channel, and so it's been super fun. This is my genuinely sitting down and record these videos is like the favorite part of my week. I get to write them, and I get to record them, and I get to spitball, and it's great. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the Substack, and I'll see you next week. Thanks again. Bye bye.